baffling murder investigation?
Each and every promising lead we have has evaporated on us. Potential suspects were not panning out.
A killer on the loose.
One of the most mean, cruel people that you will ever meet.
And a campus living in fear.
It was overwhelming. It wasn't supposed to happen.
The University of South Alabama, a sprawling 1,200-acre campus with more than 8,000 students. In the fall of 1980, 18-year-old Catherine Foster is enjoying her freshman year and living the life of her dreams.
Catherine was the perfect all-American girl. She did great in school. She did great in her athletics. She spent a lot of time helping underprivileged children.
And she has a promising future ahead of her.
And her parents knew that she would do well at the University of South Alabama. So they expected great grades, great job, great career.
They had a really good physical therapy program, and that was the career that she was interested in pursuing.
As an added bonus, Catherine has come to college with her boyfriend, Tom Jadon, from back home in Pascagoula, Mississippi. The high school sweethearts are excited to be living in the larger, more exciting city of Mobile. And Tom is enjoying a generous athletic scholarship.
Tom had accepted a position playing soccer at the University of South Alabama.
Another close high school friend is also attending South Alabama. Her name is Tish O'Sullivan.
Catherine Foster, Tom Jadon, Tish O'Sullivan went to Our Lady of Victory private Catholic high school. It was very small. The three of them were extremely close. They traveled to sports events together. They did church events together. They did charity events together. They maintained their friendship from high school right into the freshman year of college.
Before long, another familiar face joins their clique, a star athlete from their hometown who knew Tom through various sporting events. Her name is Jamie Kellum.
Well, Jamie was such an excellent tennis player in high school that she received several scholarship offers from around the Southeast. But the minute Jamie found out that Catherine, Tom, and Tish were going to the University of South Alabama, she dropped her scholarship plans and immediately enrolled at the University of South Alabama.
Well into their freshman year, things couldn't be better. On the morning of Thursday, February 21st, 1980, Catherine and Jamie leave their books behind and head off to meet Tish for some girl time and a trip to town.
Tish, Catherine, and Jamie had planned for several days to do some shopping. They planned to eat while they were off campus, and this was something that had been in works for several days.
But Catherine will never make that trip. And what happens over the next 30 minutes will forever change the lives of everyone around her.
Catherine told Jamie that she had forgotten something. It was either her purse or her checkbook, that she needed it before they went shopping, that she was going to go retrieve the item, and that she would meet Jamie back at Jamie's car in the parking lot.
Catherine never shows. And when Jamie goes back to the dorms to look for her, she's nowhere to be found. Tish finally appears, but still no Catherine.
Tish O'Sullivan and Jamie decided that she must have run into Tom, that they either went to the library to study or they had gone to get some lunch. So Tish and Jamie then went by themselves.
By nightfall, Catherine still has not returned to her dorm. No one has heard from her, not even her boyfriend, Tom. Friends begin to worry.
Tish and Jamie were talking to all the other friends. They realized that no one had seen Catherine since earlier that morning.
Catherine's friends call her family back in Pascagoula, but they haven't heard from her either.
The only thing they were able to determine that Catherine and her younger brother had spoke on the phone earlier Thursday morning before she went missing. Catherine didn't mention anything being out of the ordinary. It was strictly a casual conversation. The family contacted the Mobile Police Department early Thursday evening to report Catherine missing.
But police won't investigate a missing adult until they've been gone for 24 hours. The night goes by, and still Catherine's whereabouts are a complete mystery.
By Friday afternoon, the 24 hours had passed, so the Mobile Police Department launched a missing persons investigation on Catherine Foster.
Another day and night go by, and by Saturday morning, those closest to Catherine are starting to panic. Did something terrible happen to their friend? And could it happen to them too? Dozens of students join police in a campus-wide search.
And at approximately 10:35 a.m. that morning, word came out that they had found something.
Catherine Foster is no longer missing.
Her clothes were as if they had just been placed there. She was clean. There was no dirt. There was no sign of struggle. Her hair was flowing to the side of her head, and it looked almost as if she had laid down in the leaves to take a nap, except for the fact that she had 2 bullet holes in her head.
No one can fathom who would do such a thing or why. Shock and fear quickly spread through campus.
I had graduated from that same institution, and the thought that a female student had been murdered on the campus was just, it was overwhelming. It wasn't supposed to happen.
Police are determined to solve this case quickly. Little do they know what a long and twisted investigation the Catherine Foster case will turn out to be. Catherine Foster, a freshman at the University of South Alabama, has been found dead on the outskirts of campus, and everyone is in shock.
There were a large number of people present around the crime scene when Catherine's body was discovered. You had the searchers, many of them who needed to be questioned. Many of Catherine's friends would show up as the word spread throughout the campus that her body had been found.
As police secure the crime scene, a student comes forward with some critical information.
a female that lived in the dormitory near where Catherine lived that suffered a severe asthma condition. And she remembered that at 2:38 a.m. on Saturday morning, she had had an asthma attack. She jumped up, got her inhaler, went to the window to get some fresh air, and while standing at the window, she heard either 2 firecrackers or 2 gunshots.
If those were the fatal shots, that means Catherine was alive for more than 24 hours after her disappearance. So where was she all that time? Hopefully, an autopsy will provide some answers. Based on the lack of decomposition, the medical examiner estimates Catherine died between 8 and 24 hours before she was found.
On Saturday morning with the shots that were heard by the female student.
But oddly, there is no sign of sexual assault or offensive wounds of any kind. If Catherine was abducted and held prisoner, she didn't struggle. Investigators questioned dozens of students, starting with Catherine's closest friends. But nobody can explain how or why the freshman vanished in broad daylight and ended up dead. And Jamie Kellum, the last person to see Catherine alive, can't help but blame herself.
Just wailing and crying and carrying on. Much more than the other classmates and schoolmates of Catherine who had known Catherine all her life.
Investigators grilled Jamie, but there's no way she could have killed Catherine. At 2:38 a.m. on Saturday morning, she was off campus, spending the night with a friend and her family. Police searched their files for anyone with a history of abducting women. They discover a suspect who fits the profile and has access to the university campus.
An individual had attempted to rape and abduct a young lady several months prior. During our investigation, we determined that he was then employed by the University of South Alabama in the maintenance department, and because of his prior actions, we certainly felt like he deserved a look as a suspect.
Police bring him in for questioning.
This person seemed like a real valid suspect based on the opportunity that he would have had working on campus. Based on his past, we felt like he was an excellent suspect at the time. But information was obtained that proved he was somewhere else on campus at the time Catherine had gone missing, and he did have an alibi.
Since the autopsy revealed no sign of a fight, investigators have to wonder how she was abducted.
And that was the big issue at that time, was determining how she could have been removed from the campus against her will. This is a college campus, and there are people all over all the time, and no one had reported hearing any screams or anything. We either felt that, one, it could have been a close friend or someone she trusted, or two, it could have been an authority figure, such as security, police, or whatever, that had gotten her to leave willingly.
Police interview the two security guards on duty the night of Catherine's murder. Officer Stoney Stewart and Michael Maris tell investigators they were together on the night of the murder. Their dispatcher confirms their account. They do, however, have some valuable information for police. It seems the asthma sufferer was not the only person to hear something in the wee hours of the morning that Catherine was shot.
The two security guards that were on duty that night told us that at approximately 2:30 a.m., while in the vicinity of the dormitories, they heard either two firecrackers or two gunshots, and they immediately went to the ROTC facility to check and see if they had come from that area. We felt like that our theory that Catherine died at 2:38 a.m. on Saturday morning was a workable time of death estimate.
Though police know how and when Catherine was killed, they don't have a single shred of evidence to help determine who did it. The search for clues continues, but with no fresh leads, the investigation stalls. Then police get a break when a fresh suspect emerges.
We had a gentleman that came in and reported that his son, who had been treated for a mental disorder, had taken his automobile out the night that Catherine had gone missing.
He finds a .22 caliber pistol in the car, the same caliber used to kill Catherine.
And this father was very distraught, fearing that his son, who had been diagnosed with a mental problem, had possibly been the one that abducted and killed Catherine Foster. The father produced the weapon in question. That weapon was submitted to the forensics lab for testing.
Meantime, investigators look to the dense wooded area behind the dorms for any hidden secrets. Shadowy and isolated, it would be a perfect playground for a killer with something to hide. Police scour the entire campus for overlooked clues, but come up empty until they move their search from land to water.
We decided to search the bottom of a duck pond located adjacent to the university library. This was zero visibility. You're searching with your eyes closed, or they might as well be closed. I'd been in the water less than 15 minutes and discovered a handgun on the bottom. It was quite exhilarating. First of all, to find it, and then the possibility that it was used in a murder case. It was really an exciting moment.
Police now have two possible murder weapons. A match on either gun could lead them directly to Catherine's killer. But the ballistic lab calls back with disappointing results. Neither weapon was used to kill Catherine Foster, and investigators are quickly running out of options.
Most of us are becoming very frustrated because it seems like each and every opportunity or each and every promising lead we have has evaporated on us. Potential suspects were not panning out. They had alibis. They were able to account for where they were at the time. So at that point in time, there was a level of frustration in the investigation.
A murder unsolved. A killer on the loose. A campus living in fear. But just as the case threatens to go cold, there's another mysterious death, and it will take the case in a haunting new direction. Police are stumped after college freshman Catherine Foster is found shot to death on the University of South Alabama campus. They have no leads, no motive, and no viable suspects.
Time is passing, and it's really difficult to make any headway in the investigation.
And there are other cases that need their attention. Police are dispatched to a residence near campus where a man has been found dead from an apparent overdose of sleeping pills.
It appeared that the individual had committed suicide. It appeared from the conditions that he'd been dead 3 to 4 days.
And police know this man. He is Michael Maris, one of the security guards on duty the night of Catherine's murder. Based on a search of the home, it seems Maris became obsessed with the case.
One of the most unique things that we discovered was a copy of the autopsy report on Catherine Foster. In this report, this individual had gone through and had highlighted certain aspects of the investigation. He had made notes in the columns along the sides of the typed report. It was very unusual for a person to do this.
But as police quickly discover, Maris was a very disturbed man.
Mr. Maris was a very frustrated individual. We determined that he had applied with numerous law enforcement agencies for employment, but when it came down to the psychological evaluation, he would usually wash out. And at that point in time, all he'd ever been able to obtain were security-type jobs at South Alabama and at a mental health facility. So it was quite obvious that he was very frustrated.
Frustrated and morbid.
He spent a lot of time obsessing with death, obsessing with suicide, and even talking about in some of his writings about executions, how the person would be led up and put on his knees and shot in the back of the head. So when you get right down to it, the whole sum of this individual, he was a very strange, very unusual personality.
Police continue to search the home, and in the attic over the garage, they make a horrifying discovery. What looks like a cage, just big enough for a person.
Of course, initially our thoughts were, could this have been where Catherine Foster was kept? There was a dirty mattress, there was some filthy sheets. It was secured by a door with hinges and a hasp on it so it could be locked, and someone could have been constrained within that area.
Have investigators found their murderer? Could Michael Maris have snuck away in the middle of his shift to kill Catherine after holding her captive?
We felt like that his personality profile fit. Everything seemed to point that he would be a viable suspect.
Detectives take a closer look at Maris's work records for the week of Catherine's murder, and suddenly, the perfect suspect no longer fits the bill.
When we started to analyze the time that Catherine was missing from Thursday to Saturday, we were able to determine that Maris was at work. He didn't miss any shifts. Ms. Foster exhibited no signs of having been confined or restrained in any way, and we just felt like this would have been the case had she been kept somewhere. There should have been some sign of resistance.
So why did the security guard have a cage in his house?
We were able to determine that the space above the garage was actually intended for secluding Mr. Maris's grandfather, who suffered from some form of dementia. Apparently, they would literally seclude him in the area and lock the door to keep him from wandering the neighborhood.
Detectives officially rule Maris out as a suspect in the case, and the investigation is back to square one.
It had been a cool case. It was getting cold pretty quickly.
And so it will remain for years to come. An unsolved murder haunting a college campus. It's not until 2 decades later that a secret will be exposed. A secret that will finally blow the case wide open. It's been over 20 years since freshman Catherine Foster was murdered on the University of South Alabama campus, leaving behind so many unanswered questions.
This was a very well publicized, almost a notorious case in the community of Mobile.
In 1993, a TV news reporter becomes intrigued by the unsolved murder and starts investigating the case herself. Her stories air throughout the states of Alabama and Mississippi. The renewed interest in the case triggers a surprising phone call to the Mobile Police Department from an officer in the victim's hometown of Pascagoula, Mississippi.
I received a phone call from the Pascagoula Police Department. They stated to me that they had an individual that had come to their office and had information about one of our unsolved murders of Catherine Foster.
Officer Morgan is eager to hear what this new informant has to say.
I drove to Pascagoula to speak to this witness, Ricky Charlton. He basically relayed to me that a female in his Alcoholics Anonymous class had confided in him she had killed this female while on the campus of South Alabama. Ricky met this woman at AA as she was working through her steps of the program. One of the steps is that you have to make amends to everybody that you have wronged. Because she is deceased, the victim is deceased, she asked Ricky how she was able to do that.
Ricky identifies the confessed killer as Jamie Letson. It doesn't ring a bell until investigators uncover her maiden name.
Jamie Letson turned out to be Jamie Kellum. She had married, divorced, and is using her ex-husband's name today. As it turned out, Jamie was the last person to be seen with Catherine alive. Jamie was considered a suspect very early on in the investigation. However, she had an alibi for the time period of what was believed to be Catherine's time of death.
But Jamie's odd behavior after Catherine's death has always raised suspicions.
Jamie's behavior was so bizarre and over the top that many of Catherine's friends and family noticed it and were put off by it. In fact, even noticed that it appeared to be feigned and put on almost as if she was trying to make a show of her grief.
According to Jamie's AA confidant, it all had to do with Catherine's boyfriend, Tom.
Jamie told Ricky that she met Tom in high school. She had a crush on him, and she developed this very strong crush on him.
Tom was a very accomplished athlete. He played tennis, and Jamie played tennis for her school, and that's where the two of them first crossed paths and would have met each other. And Jamie probably began her crush on him at that point.
We heard from several people that Jamie actually gave up a tennis scholarship at another school to follow Tom to the University of South Alabama. She was able to insert herself into Catherine's circle. She all of a sudden started mingling with her friends and just really joined the group in order to get close to Tom.
With the cold case now red hot, police started interviewing Jamie's friends and family. One of her cousins tells investigators about a letter they have to see, a letter likely to be found at Jamie's stepfather's house.
Another investigator and I drove to Pascagoula to speak to her stepfather to talk about this letter. He goes, "You mean the letter?" And he says, "Well, I'll let you see it yourself." He took me to another room where he had a set of lockers, just like there would be in any school, middle school, high school. He unlocked it, opened it up, and he took out this notebook, gave it to me. I opened it up. I start to look through it. I see the handwritten note on it, and I'm looking at it. It starts out, "Dear Catherine, it is me, Jamie, the one who took your life."
After decades of frustration, police have just found what appears to be a confession.
I was so excited, I just closed it. I didn't read any more than that. Gave it to my partner to hold. I was ready to go.
But more than 20 years after Catherine was murdered, with Jamie already ruled out as the killer, this case is far from closed.
I know you'll mistake. I'm a terrible, terrible person. I would do something like that. She was a good girl and a friend of mine.
After 22 years, police in Alabama have reopened the murder investigation of Catherine Foster. Lead investigator Mike Morgan has turned up a letter from Catherine's college friend, Jamie, confessing to the murder because of her obsession with Catherine's boyfriend.
The obsession that Jamie had for Tom was apparently overwhelming to her. We learned that she had portrayed to her family that Tom was her boyfriend. She had stolen pictures of Tom and, was just portraying to everybody that that was her boyfriend, that she was living this life with him. And none of it was true. It was all a lie.
Police now have their first real break in a case that has stumped them for more than 2 decades.
When we got back to Mobile, I gave the letter to our identification section. They examined it. They were able to lift a couple of prints from it. They even were able to match those prints to Jamie Letson. This was huge as far as I was concerned, because not only do I have this letter, I have her prints on it indicating that she is the person who wrote this letter.
But the excitement is short-lived.
The Mobile police discovered Jamie Letson's 3-page handwritten confession. They took it to the local assistant district attorney and asked her to prosecute the case.
But she says no. Based on Catherine's time of death, as determined by a medical examiner, there is no way Jamie could be the killer.
The assistant district attorney told the police that due to the time of death controversy, that Jamie Letson had an alibi for the 24 hours after Catherine went missing. And the local assistant district attorney felt that that would negate the confession and the case was not winnable.
Catherine had been found at around 10:30 a.m. on Saturday. The medical examiner determined that she was killed 8 to 24 hours earlier, during which time Jamie has an airtight alibi. It doesn't make sense.
I decided to speak to Dr. Riddick. He was the original medical examiner that performed the autopsy in 1980.
More than 2 decades later, does the medical examiner still stand by his original report?
Dr. Riddick told me that there's been a lot more research done on time of death. Lots of studies, and today we know that there are many factors that influence the rate of decomposition. And he stated to me that he certainly could have made a mistake on his estimation of time of death in 1980.
So what does the medical examiner think now about when Catherine Foster was killed?
Dr. Riddick's first words to me that it was very possible that she could have been laying out in those woods for the entire 48 hours that she was missing. Even though Dr. Riddick had given us this new opinion, we still needed more scientific information to kind of back up our theory of what happened. I'd learned about the Body Farm, which is at the University of Tennessee, which is basically they do research on decomposition of actual human bodies.
Investigators from Mobile take a field trip to the Body Farm to see if experts there can help them make their case.
We walk out to this facility, we walk into the woods, and there are literally bodies on both sides of the trail.
They turn to Dr. Lee Jantz, a forensic anthropologist, to find out if Catherine Foster's well-preserved body could have been dead for longer than 24 hours.
In our meeting with Dr. Jantz, she had two bodies that were out at their location that had been out there for, one was 48 hours, one was 69 hours. Very close to the 48 hours that we suspected Catherine was out in the woods. She noted that the temperatures in Tennessee were about the same as it was in Mobile in 1980.
Incredibly, the bodies show very little signs of decay. But what about insect activity?
My question to her was, would you expect to see larvae or fly eggs on the body after 48 hours? And she takes us to these two bodies in particular. We examined both of them, and on both of them, there are no fly eggs or larvae. I was convinced at that point that we had Jamie. There was nothing else we needed.
Based on this up-to-date research, Catherine could have been killed the very morning she disappeared, after spending time alone with Jamie.
Finally, on November 21st, 2008, we got an indictment for murder, an arrest warrant basically for Jamie.
The plan is to surprise her at the halfway house where she's living in Jackson, Mississippi, and get a quick confession.
That morning we show up at the halfway house, we pull into the location, and she's standing outside. And as soon as we get out of the car, she yells out to us, "Hey, it's me, Jamie, you're here for me."
How could she possibly know that?
It turns out one of our secretaries that was making hotel reservations for us had called the halfway house and asked the director for the closest hotel. And once the director hung up with our secretary, she asked the people living at this halfway house, why would Mobile detectives be coming to the facility?
Suddenly, Jamie realizes her past has caught up to her.
And I mean, it completely ruined our surprise because she now had a 24-hour notice and time to prepare what she was going to say to us before we arrived.
Police take Jamie into custody and drive her back to Mobile, where she is indicted for murdering the girl she once pretended was her best friend so many years ago. At the police station, detectives tell Jamie this is her last opportunity to make a statement about the murder.
I know you're mistake. I'm a terrible, terrible person. Yeah, I would do something like that. She was a good girl and a friend of mine.
And she basically said, yes, I want to tell you what happened. Jamie told us that she had hoped to break Catherine and Tom up.
I I had been obsessed with boy Tom. I'd been obsessed about him even when I was in school, in high school.
So one day she stole a gun from her grandmother and then just waited for the opportunity to get Catherine out of the way.
On that fateful day, Jamie told Catherine she needed to find a certain plant for a class she was taking and lured her hapless victim into the woods. Catherine had no idea what Jamie had planned.
We left my apartment. She left her books there. We got in the car. I drove around. And we just stopped. I said, let's get out and walk and see what's back from here. She walked with me.
She was actually walking behind Catherine. She removed the gun from her purse.
And I shot her.
Shot her in the back of the head. Jamie said that when she did that, Catherine just turned and just looked at her. And just stood for, a minute or a couple of minutes until she finally fell.
Everything being in slow motion. There was such a big roar inside my head when I shot her.
Catherine was still making a noise. She was obviously still alive. Jamie said that she shot her in the head a second time.
Jamie quickly headed back to her dorm and got rid of the gun, just in time to craft her story about Catherine going missing. Somehow, she managed to pull off the murder and get back in time to go on a shopping trip without rousing anyone's suspicion. Given this confession, investigators think they have a slam-dunk case. 30 years after the murder, the case goes to trial. Incredibly, Jamie pleads not guilty, claiming that her confession was made up and pointing the finger at the dead security guard. But no one's buying her defense. The jury deliberates for less than a day before finding Jamie Kellum Letson guilty of first-degree murder. She is sentenced to life in prison.
Well, Jamie Letson was one of the most mean, cruel people that you will ever meet.
Catherine Foster's life got painfully short, but at least now her family has answers. Finally, after 3 decades, there is justice in Alabama.